Urabai was situated northeast of the Rorskid archipelago. The straight line distance wasn't too great, but the safe sea route had required ships to take many twists and turns, causing the distance traveled to increase by several hundred nautical miles. It was originally a primitive island that harbored many kinds of beyond-earth creatures without any humans inhabiting it. After the hunting era came to an end, the Loam Kingdom banished certain criminals there, causing Urabai Island to gradually have villages and towns. When more eastern islands were discovered and colonized, the area attracted many new immigrants due to the convenience of the sea route and its rich natural resources, making it a rather thriving port city. The light from the lighthouse tower appeared so warm in the dark environment as it led liners towards the harbor for them to dock. We finally arrived. My gratitude to the Crimson Moon and Fate for blessing me. Darkwell jumped off the last gangway and stepped on the solid cemented ground. To be precise, apart from fate, you should thank the fool and see God for their blessings. Klein held his leather suitcase with one hand as he tapped his cane. Darkville properly put away the ring box which contained the die of probability, and he didn't delay in asking where the bellman, Carnot, stayed. He rented a carriage and went straight for St. Draco Cathedral. He then entered the magnificent bell tower, which boldly used the colors of red, blue, and yellow. Inside the bell tower, Carnot had a cramped room he could call his own. Knock, knock, knock. Darkville knocked on the door thrice, eager to hand over the item on his person. With a creak, the brown wooden door opened and out came a large man who was slightly hunched. He looked to be in his 40s, and individually, there was nothing strange about his facial features, but when put together, it was filled with an unharmonious vibe. Klein only took a glance and discovered that his eyes weren't leveled. His nostrils were of different sizes, and his left facial muscles were slightly loose, causing the corner of his mouth to droop slightly. It was the complete opposite for the right side of his face. Carnot's legs were obviously of different lengths, and one of his arms was thick, while the other was thin. His entire body was highly disproportional, making him extremely ugly. Who are you? Dressed in a black robe, Carnot glanced at the duo. Are you the bellman, Carnot? Darkwill asked cautiously. Carnot chuckled with one corner of his mouth raised while the other stayed low. There shouldn't be a second person as ugly as me. Indeed, Darkville nodded very honestly before laughing. I can tell that you have quite a good state of mind. To be honest, looks don't matter for a man. What's important is their skills in bed. TSK, that's because you haven't seen ladies who only have fetishes for good looks having experienced the era of celebrities of the masses, Klein scoffed from the side. Carnot's expression darkened as he said, I don't wish to discuss such matters. You have problems in that area. No problem. I have different kinds of medicine that can treat all your problems. Before Darkwill finished his sentence, Klein took a step forward, afraid that he would end up being beaten to death. He put half his body between them as he said in a deep voice, he's Roy King's student. I figured. Roy King once described his traits. Carnot made way and invited the two in. His room was extremely tiny, with only a single bed and a cabinet which could be used as a dining table. The washroom was at the bottom of the bell tower. Darkwill pulled out a ring box and handed it to Carnot as he forced a smile. My teacher got me to hand this item to you. Carnot stole a glance at it and was clearly relieved to see 4 points. He said to Darkwill, you aren't as unreliable as your teacher described you to be. I can tell that you didn't attempt to use it. That would have awoken it and make it realize that it's no longer sealed. The chubby apothecary's face blushed red as he honestly said, that's because it's relatively quiet now. In another 1 to 2 hours, it will automatically roll itself. It's best you think of a method to seal it again. Carnot's face twitched. Again. Well, I accidentally dropped it on the ground, and then I came alive. Darkwill wanted to glance at his owl, Harry, but he realized that it hadn't followed him in. It was perched outside the bell tower, to serve as a sentry. Carnot's eyes clearly widened as his hunched back nearly straightened. How did you arrive here? From his point of view, Roy King's student should have long died at the whims of the die. Darkwill hurriedly pointed to Gem Sparrow and said, it's all thanks to this gentleman. He's a powerful adventurer. He provided the most effective protection and a temporary method of sealing the die. What method was it? Carnot blurted out the question. Klein laughed and replied, trade secret. Carnot's expression changed a few times as he pressed his hand to his chest and bowed. I thank you for your help on behalf of my organization. Darkwill continued. Hiring him costs £1,000 and a request. The request is to help him find a mystical item with powerful offensive traits, but without very serious negative side effects. He will purchase it at a reasonable price. I only had about £300, so that was all I could pay. I'll have to rely on you to pay the rest. Carnot fell silent as the corners of his lips twitched. I only have about £100. Suddenly, there was silence in the bellman's room. The wind from outside blew through the cracks and brushed across the 3 men's face. Finally, Carnot spoke again. Perhaps Councillor Rickshadow has the money. I'll lead you to him. From the looks of it, he trusts us. After all, a fate councillor is in no way comparable to a die of probability. If there were really problems with us, there would be no need for us to bring the die over to prevent any accidents and snatch away the uniqueness. Klein watched as Carnot picked up a lantern from the corner of the room. At this moment, he secret activated his spirit vision and simply scanned the man. Klein nearly pricked up his brows with the sight. This was because Carnot's aura colors were rather unique. There were no problems with his emotional colors, as they were very ordinary. However, his ether body which represented his body appeared unnatural. His heart was green, his head was purple, and his digestive system was yellow. It felt like they were different parts which were mashed together in great disharmony. At the same time, Carnot's soul also gave the same feeling. A monster that was stitched up internally. Klein made a rough judgment based on what he knew. After Carnot got the lantern, he turned his head to glance at the adventurer, Gem Sparrow, and said without much of an expression, I'm very sensitive to spirit vision. I believe you have noticed certain problems. I'm not a naturally born person. I'm a product of the Church of Earth Mother's attempts to refine the human body. I'm considered a failed specimen, which is why I do not have the ability in that aspect. His final sentence was directed at Darkwill. Carnot didn't speak again as he carried the lantern and donned a black robe. He hunched his huge body and used the dim light to walk down the stairs of the dark and silent bell tower. Product of the Church of Earth Mother's attempts to refine the human body. But St. Draco Cathedral belongs to the Church of Storms. Since it's a failed specimen, no attention is paid to it. Carnot turned his back on the Church of Earth Mother and became a member of the Life School of Thought. This is understandable. Both the Church of Earth Mother and the Life School of Thought hold the apothecary pathway, and they will definitely have some overlapping. But why would the Life School of Thought send this fellow? That doesn't seem simple to be a bellman, to the Church of Storms. Is it just a normal disguise, or there's a particular connection between the two? Klein followed Carnot in a seemingly calm manner as he walked out the bell tower and circled round to a stone bridge. Just as he came close to the left side of the bridge, Klein suddenly felt something as he looked diagonally upwards. The owl, Harry, had flown out as well and landed on a tree branch. Cager. The branch suddenly snapped as Harry plummeted. With great difficulty did it fly up again without falling to the ground. Dark Will was just about to say something when Carnot explained in a deep voice, Councillor Richardo is injured, so his powers are somewhat out of control. Once anyone enters a specific range, they will be tainted with bad luck. Carnot stopped in his footsteps as he threw the ring box containing the die under the bridge. Mr. Councillor, Roy King's student has delivered the die. Very good. A hoarse voice sounded from deep within the bridge's belly. A silver-scaled palm reached out from the darkness as he held down the ring box which had fallen onto the mud. Following that, he opened the ring box and took out the milky white die. His other hand, which was covered in silver scales, also reached out as he held a piece of a paper-like item made of leather. The item resembled a water pipe, but its ends were connected. It revealed a greyish-white colour under the crimson moonlight. Its surface had many complicated symbols and labels, as well as many words in Hermes text which pointed to the snake of Mercury, Winoseptin. Fate Councillor Richardo pulled the item apart and stuffed the die of probability into it before connecting the two ends together. Using fate at a small scale to seal the die of probability with periodic boundary conditions, making it remain in a perpetual state of slumber or calm. Indeed, Snake of Mercury Winoseptin had foreseen such a situation and had made certain preparations. Klein retracted his gaze in relief, and he heard Richardo's hoarse voice. I already know of your agreement, Mr. Gem and Sparrow. I will help you find the mystical item after I've recovered. As for the £700, I'll immediately augment you with good luck. Go to the few casinos in Orabai and make some bets and you'll receive the corresponding reward. Remember, do not win more than £200 at each casino. You must not win more than £700 in total. Which is to say that you don't have the money either. Seeing how you're hiding while injured, it's considered normal not to have money with you. Klein nodded indiscernibly and said, okay. He waited for about 10 seconds without sensing anything. Councillor Richardo heaved a sigh of relief and said, you have become sufficiently lucky. Is that so? Klein chose to believe him and didn't disturb Dark Will's report to a senior of how his teacher had been imprisoned. Based on Carnot's introduction, he found a nearby casino and sat at the blackjack table. After about 10 minutes, he walked out of the casino with a blank look. Not only did he not win money, but he had lost a total of £30. What happened to the good luck? Why did I believe him? That darn old man is terrible. Klein didn't hesitate to return to the stone bridge and approached its belly. That fast? You have pretty good luck. Richardo laughed as he coughed under the dark bridge. At that moment, Dark Will and Harry had already found a nearby inn to live in. Klein replied without a change in expression, I lost. Lost. Richardo ruminated over the word and couldn't formulate a sentence for quite a long period of time. In the dark environment, an ordinary owl nervously flew over. The two street lamps on either side of the stone bridge silently illuminated the street, but they were unable to disperse the darkness beneath. Only the crimson moonlight from high above could barely illuminate the brown soil. Hidden under the bridge, Fate Councillor Richardo remained silent for quite a while, making Klein suspect whether he had already passed away due to his heavy injuries. He guessed that a large reason as to why the luck augmentation had failed was because of this. Just as Klein was about to ask a probing question to determine the situation, Richardo coughed and said in a deep, hoarse voice, you live up to the reputation of being a powerful adventurer capable of temporarily sealing the die. What happened has exceeded my expectations. I'm very curious as to why my luck augmentation on you had failed. I'm very regretful that I can't come out and meet you in person. Otherwise, I should be able to see what Beyonders from other pathways will find difficult to see, even if they possess relatively powerful spirit visions. This is the uniqueness that the Fate pathway holds. So the problem lies with me. That's not the point. The point is that you need to reimburse me £700, no, £730. Klein cursed as he couldn't help but recall the orphan, Adam Izor, who had the nickname of Monster in Tingen City. The young man who was equal to half a sequence 9 had cried out after seeing Klein before falling to the ground. His eyes bled, and the fear he exhibited was as if he had seen a devil. This is because of the uniqueness of the Wheel of Fortune's path of the divine, so he saw something wrong with me. He saw something related to the grey fog. Unfortunately, this Fate Councillor is quite heavily injured and has a domain of bad luck around him. There's no way for him to help inspect me. I should ask Snake of Fate Winoseptin when I'm back. Perhaps he might know something. However, this pathway does have the bearing of a charlatan. He might not directly answer me and has a high chance of answering in vague terms. Klein maintained his expressionless attitude and said, then, what do you plan on doing? Richardo sighed and said, get Dark Will here. I'll augment him with good luck and get him to win the money at the casinos on your behalf. Using the name of the inn councillor Richardo gave, Klein quickly found the chubby apothecary, Dark Will. Then, while carrying the suitcase and cane, Klein watched as he kept winning money at the major casinos. By midnight, he had already won £750. After receiving the remaining £730, Klein realized the problem. The reason for the luck augmentation's failure was because of him. Why is that so? Klein held close his bulging wallet and frowned as he thought silently to himself. He quickly thought of the thin, invisible greyish-white fog around him and realized the reason. After advancing to Faceless, the grey fog has integrated with reality to a certain extent. Not only can it help me screen off ravings that aren't too powerful, but it can also destroy any influence that changes my fate to a certain extent. Therefore, this councillor's luck augmentation was ineffective. According to this logic, bad luck to a certain extent shouldn't affect me either. Hey, what the heck? It doesn't make me become some unlucky fool, but it also destroys my chance of being a lucky man or winner. Klein secretly shook his head and followed Dark Will and the owl back to the stone bridge. He informed Richardo of how to summon his messenger and to immediately send him news once he obtained any information on a mystical item with powerful offensive traits. After doing all of this, Klein found an inn at the Orabai Island's port city and got a simple room for himself. Backland. In the morning, Emlyn White walked under his favourite gloomy skies, moving through the thick fog that couldn't be compared to those in November or December as he once again arrived outside Northborough's 7 Pinchlet Street. After pulling the doorbell, he straightened his back as he lifted his chin and waited patiently. When Leonard opened the door, he looked at the handsome but detestable face before making way and allowing the visitor to enter. He was still dressed in his home wear, comprising of a white shirt and black trousers. However, he had an additional dark-coloured vest draped over him. Have you considered the matter? Leonard asked with a smile. No problem. Since it wasn't his money, Emlyn had no intention to haggle. He even believed that with the attitude displayed by Leonard, there was a high chance of having the price raised if he tried. Leonard gently nodded and smiled. Very rich. I can tell that you're trying to lead me to say more. Emlyn silently scoffed and replied, that's not something you need to concern yourself with. With that said, he raised the suitcase in his hand and opened it, revealing £7,000 in cash. Leonard took out each stack of cash and thoroughly checked it carefully. Then, he pulled off the red glove he wore on his left hand and handed it to Emlyn. This is the mystical item you require. It can change colours to disguise itself. It's called Tinder. It can raise the wearer's charm, making his words be equipped with great persuasiveness. It can steal the beyond the power of a target within 50 meters. The more you understand the target, the easier it is to steal the power you wish to steal. The less you know, the more random it becomes, and it relies on luck. When the target is at sequence 6, there is a chance of failure. The higher the sequence, the higher the chance of failure. After the theft succeeds, the target will lose the beyond the power, and it will take at least 12 hours to recover. The owner of Tinder will be able to use it adequately for 10 minutes. And the reason why it's expensive is because it has very few negative side effects. Emlyn, who silently took in the introduction, had his interest piqued by a mystical item like Tinder. He asked, what are its negative side effects? Leonard combed his hair and smiled. First, when wearing it, there is a small probability of losing something on you. Second, when using it, a particular beyond the power belonging to you will be lost for at least 12 hours, but during this period, it will be the only beyond the power lost. In other words, even if it's used repeatedly, there will only be one power lost the entire time. Compared to the many sealed artifacts I know of, its negative side effects are indeed trivial. Emlyn cleared his throat as he nodded. He received Tinder and checked it carefully before taking out the stacks of cash from the suitcase and placing them on the coffee table. Following that, he placed the glove into the suitcase and didn't take it with him directly. With the suitcase, Emlyn returned to the Harvest Church just like he did before. Once he entered the priest's break room, he set up a sacrifice ritual. The illusory and mysterious door opened as the red glove tore through the dark and deep void as it was sent directly above the grey fog. At the moment the grey fog made contact with the glove, a tiny, distorted, terrifying face suddenly appeared. It kept evaporating as it struggled to sustain itself. Upon seeing this scene, Klein wasn't surprised. After all, the grandpa residing in Leonard's body was an angel of the Marauder pathway. If Eamon could do it, it was quite certain that he was capable of doing the same. For this, he had made sufficient preparations. He believed that even if the grandpa had really reached Eamon's level, he was able to wipe out the corresponding aura without making him sense the existence of the grey fog, making him take action on Emlyn. Picking up the sea god scepter, which had long been placed in front of him, Klein made the blue gems light up at the same time from a commanding position. Suddenly, silver light bloomed above the grey fog as the lightning carried portions of the grey fog's powers like a storm, zapping the tiny illusory face. The face dissipated completely before it could even cry out, leaving behind a dead translucent worm with 12 transparent rings. Worm of time, but it seems weaker than Eamon, Klein muttered as he beckoned with his hand for the red glove and familiar worm to fly to him. After some serious scrutiny, he confirmed that the worm was basically identical to the one Eamon's avatar had left behind. My dear poet's grandpa is of the same sequence as Eamon. Sequence 1. No, not necessarily. Perhaps this is a unique trait of one of the earlier sequences. If it's really a sequence 1. The notion that Eamon is the son of the creator and the king of angels makes it possible that he has fused with the uniqueness or has another sequence 1 characteristic. Klein made a guess, but he was unable to verify it. As for what the dead worm of time could be used for, or when its spirituality would completely dissipate, he could only throw it into the junk pile due to his lack of the corresponding knowledge. 7 Pinster Street, Backland. Leonard Mitchell sat on the sofa with his eyes tightly closed. His legs were propped up on the coffee table as though he was using a short nap to make up for an entire night of being awake. After an unknown period of time, he suddenly opened his eyes and said with a suppressed voice, "What happened? Have you determined the true buyer of Tinder?" An elderly voice rang out in his mind. "The aura I left behind has been eliminated, completely eliminated." "Did you discover anything?" Leonard retracted his feet as he asked in a deep voice. The ancient voice sighed. "Nothing. Everything was over before I could react. If I were in my best state, I might have been able to grasp the relevant clues. Unfortunately, I've remained in a weak state for years." Leonard remained silent for more than 10 seconds before he shook his head. "Then we'll temporarily treat it as if this never happened." Above the grey fog, Klein listened to Emlyn's report and took note of the information regarding a mystical item. He fiddled with the glove named Tinder as he examined it. Hey, this way, I'll have a glove for my right hand," he chuckled as he muttered to himself. After serious consideration, Klein abandoned the thought of immediately extracting the mental corruption of the true creator from the all-black eye. This was to ensure his success, hoping to leave the chance to the moment when he was concocting the Nimblewright Master Potion. According to the records of the City of Silver, even without the grey fog screening, there were no problems with such a procedure. Furthermore, with the grey fog, there wouldn't be any additional accidents, even if it were the mental corruption left behind by the true creator. I can also use Tinder normally. Yes, when I need to use it, I have to put my cash, pocket watch, and other mystical items above the grey fog. I mustn't let any item become lost. In fact, even if I don't do so, the problem isn't too great. I must hear, do I need to be afraid of not being able to find things I dropped? Hey, in a normal battle, I'll have creeping hunger on my left hand and Tinder on my right. Just the thought of it sounds formidable. Klein reined in his thoughts and discovered that everything related to the Sequence 5 Nimblewright Master Potion was ready, apart from the 2 commonly seen supplementary ingredients. He nodded indiscernibly and muttered silently to himself, "I just need to wait for the faceless potion to be completely digested. Then, I'll board the ship of Admiral of Stars or the Hanged Man and head east of the Sonia Sea to find mermaids." Lowen Kingdom, East Chester County, Stone City. Having left the man, Audrey moved into a villa. After she finished engaging in social gatherings with the local nobles, she sent her servant to the Varvac Bank to withdraw a sum of cash. She didn't need to worry about this any further. She could easily pay off the £2,000 she owed Mr. Fool's Blessed, and she could also pay the £1,800 she owed Mr. World for the psychiatrist characteristic. 15 minutes later, Audrey opened the room to her bedroom and glanced at her personal maid-servant, Annie, who was monitoring the servants while they did their work. She looked down at the golden retriever who was sitting by the side of the wall and smiled. With a smile, she suppressed her voice and asked with shining eyes, "Susie, you'll receive a gift in a while. Are you looking forward to it?" If it were in the past, Audrey would have definitely said, "Susie, your present is here," making the golden retriever realize that she could find the actual item in the room as well. Otherwise, it was very easy for Susie, who had been studying the basics of mysticism, to guess that Audrey had used ritualistic magic. With this new sentence structure, the situation could have Audrey receive a mysterious letter or news in her bedroom to confirm that the gift was about to be delivered. There would be too many possibilities as a result of this. Susie could read the joy and sincere attitude deep inside Audrey's heart as she subconsciously opened her mouth, hoping to stir the air to produce a voice. She had wanted to inquire about the gift, but she sharply sensed that Audrey's personal maid, Annie, was approaching. The alert Susie abandoned her original thoughts. She returned to the state of being an ordinary dog as she slowly wagged her tail to express her joy and anticipation. After making an excuse to head out, Audrey entered a chemistry laboratory that she had specially marked out for herself. She placed the psychiatrist characteristic and supplementary ingredients on the table. "Susie, do you still remember the potion concocting process?" She cleared her throat and straightened her back as she excitedly played the role of a teacher. "Woof, I remember." Susie already knew what her present was. In her joy, she barked. Audrey added, "Try to concoct it by yourself." Susie looked down at her paws and suddenly fell silent. Audrey was taken aback before a brief silence ensued. A few seconds later, before the golden retriever could speak, Audrey covered her mouth without any atypical response and giggled. "All right, Susie, there's no need to say a word. I know what you wish to say. You wish to express the fact that you're only a dog and am unable to concoct the potion, right?" How embarrassing. At the same time, Audrey, who wore a charming and graceful external bearing, facepalmed herself inwardly. "Woof," Susie nodded forcefully. Audrey took the opportunity and turned around. Soon, she finished concocting the psychiatrist's potion. She had previously asked Susie and learned that she had already finished digesting the potion on Wednesday. That's less than 2 months. Yes, a large reason has to do with how Susie isn't being noticed. She can run about anywhere in the manor or villa and eavesdrop, allowing her to read the true thoughts of the maidservants that's good as well. She will always share the tidbits with me. If not her, I wouldn't have known of the dark sides of many people who appear normal and kind. Usually Audrey poured the potion into a bowl and placed it on the floor. She watched as Susie went over and began licking the potion as she couldn't curb the anticipation in her heart. Susie might be influenced by the potion and become unstable. But it's all right. Psychiatrist Miss Audrey is already prepared to use placate at any moment. Yes, I prefer the name psychoanalysis. That sounds more professional. Audrey stared at Susie with her beautiful emerald-like eyes with great seriousness and discovered that Susie's pupils were gradually fading and turning vertical. Dark gold scales seemed to grow beneath her thick fur, and the spirituality that belonged to Susie kept radiating outwards as though it was interweaving with the entire villa's space. After calming her somewhat nervous emotions, Audrey scrutinized Susie's state. As long as something abnormal happened to Susie, she would immediately use the beyond her power, psychoanalysis. Suddenly, Susie's voice sounded out in her ears. "Audrey, I'm done." Audrey was temporarily at a loss on what to say. In her dream, Daisy returned to Eastborough and to the old apartment she had lived in for years. She pushed open the door and saw her mother, Liz, and her sister, Fraser, doing the laundry diligently. Daisy instantly became delighted and was just about to join them. She was in charge of ironing the laundry. At this moment, she heard knocking at the door. She turned her head and realized that the visitor was a young man in a black and white checkered police uniform. The officer had black hair and green eyes, with a somewhat blurry face. He held a notebook and found in pen as he asked, "In the Capheim case, apart from what you mentioned, is there anything else you didn't mention to us?" "It's all nothing important," Daisy answered in a rather groggy manner. The handsome officer looked down at his notebook and said, "It's fine. I'm willing to listen." Daisy looked back at the clothes which were hung up, feeling as though she had forgotten some instructions. She honestly described all sorts of trivialities. "In the end," she said, "after I was abducted, my mother and sister had hired a private detective to search for me. His name is Mr. Sherlock Moriarty. He's a good man. Although he didn't find me directly, he later contacted a reporter to help me get compensated with the foundation money." The black-haired and green-eyed officer looked up again and glanced at Daisy before revealing a warm smile. "Very good. Your answer is very satisfactory. Do you still remember the private detective's appearance?" Daisy nodded. Without any alarm, she saw Mr. Sherlock Moriarty standing beside her. The detective had grown a thick beard and wore gold-rimmed glasses. It was almost identical to the one in her memories. After the black-haired, green-eyed officer sized up the image a few times, he seemed to vanish at some point in time without Daisy realizing it. For some reason, her mother and sister had also vanished. She ran through Eastborough in search of the familiar figures, but she ultimately woke up from her depression and sorrow. When she saw the dark ceiling of her school dormitory, she lay there in a daze for seconds. Daisy didn't make a sound as she turned her body and buried half her face into the pillow. By the corners of the pillow, a wet stain gradually spread out. The person who had entered Daisy's dream was none other than Leonard Metchell. Although his investigation of the commonalities of the two cases was to give him time to deal with matters of his own, he didn't forget to act in a perfunctory manner. In the end, he really discovered a problem. In the cases of Lanivus and Capheim, a private detective named Sherlock Moriarty was involved, including his friend, reporter Mike Joseph. Although they had only appeared on the outskirts of this matter, it's also a direction for the investigation. "Hey, that Sherlock Moriarty looks somewhat familiar. Which fugitive is he?" Leonard recalled what he had seen in the dream as he wore his red glove and entered the basement of St. Samuel Cathedral. Just as he greeted the team captain, Soust, he saw a partner approach and hand him 2 thin sheets of paper. "The information regarding the red-eyed man from the Harvest Church is all here." "Thank you. Do you want to have lunch together?" Leonard asked with a smile. The network shrugged and said, "No, as long as you stop making me have nightmares." "Deal." Leonard smiled as he received the dossier. He stood there without being in a hurry to sit down as he casually browsed through it. Emmeline White, a vampire, currently under the jurisdiction of the Church of Earth Mother. He once vanished for a period of time. His parents had hired private detectives to find him. Thanks to a particular Mr. Stewart, this matter was ultimately resolved by the famous detective, Sherlock Moriarty. Leonard's smile gradually froze as his expression turned serious. Sherlock Moriarty, he repeated this name in his mind. Clyde wasn't in a rush to find an opportunity to engage in true acting. He toured Oravi Island's port city with the mindset of a tourist, finding a brief and rare moment of relaxation in his tense life. This city had mostly immigrants from Loam. The cuisine wasn't much different from the east coast of the kingdom, with the only difference being that there were rare fruits and all sorts of seafood here. It was also quite a unique trait of the city. This place was rich in natural resources and was located in a key location on the safe sea routes. The standard of living was pretty good. Even the farmers in the suburbs could save up some money through their fruit gardens. This didn't mean that Oravi didn't have poor people or the lower class. This class was mainly made up of people who were former slaves. Loan's parliament had long abolished slavery. After chewing a juicy and sweet fruit, Klein watched the sky turn dark. He took a turn at the corner of the street and entered a bar named Sweet Lemon. It was a famous gathering place for adventurers in Oravi. Klein planned on buying the 2 remaining supplementary ingredients of an Imbrite Master, the relatively common Drago tree bark and Sonia Golden Spring Water. At this moment, the bar was rather lively. There were many people holding up cups around the boxing ring as they cheered loudly. There were people who looked like adventurers at the surrounding tables. They were discussing all kinds of rumors in hushed tones. Just as Klein was squeezing towards the bar counter, he suddenly heard his name. "I'm Gemman Sparrow. You should know who I am. I received a treasure map and need to hire some helpers. It's not because I'm afraid, but it's because I can't carry that much treasure alone." A green-eyed man in his 30s held half a glass of liquor and spoke to 2 men and 2 women in the corner. It was a mystery if they were merchants or adventurers. "You are also named Gemman Sparrow? Treasure map, why does it sound like a scam? My killing of Orm Tongue has already reached this place from Bayam?" "Yes, it was likely communicated via a telegram or visitors." Therefore, many people know of my name and deeds, but do not know what I look like. Cheats are using this opportunity to pass themselves off as me to cheat others. Klein moved over as he came to a realization. The green-eyed man drank a mouthful of liquor and slammed the glass onto the table. I don't mind whether you refuse or agree, but I hate it when people make me wait. Do you wish to be like Ormtongue? The young man opposite him said, slightly intimidated, I know you're a powerful adventurer. So, the green-eyed man cut off the man's words. At that moment, he felt his collar tighten as he was lifted up by someone and thrown out the door. Klein didn't provide an explanation as he directly threw the man out of the door with a stoic expression. Then, he drew his revolver and aimed it at the spot where the man had fallen to the ground. He pulled the trigger without any hesitation. Bang! Just as the green-eyed man fell to the ground, he saw a spark light up at the ground near his crotch. He was so frightened that he swallowed back his cursing and scrambled away. Without any explanation, his weak performance proved that he wasn't Gemman Sparrow. Klein ignored the victim who stood there in a daze. He politely blew at the mouth of his revolver before stuffing it back into his underarm holster. Following that, he walked slowly to the bar counter in the resulting silent atmosphere. Klein sat in front of the bar counter and slammed his fist onto the counter. 1 glass of Southville beer. Behind him, a few bouncers hesitated about whether to come over to give him a warning or pretend that no one had fired a shot. The bartender signaled to the bouncers with his eyes as he picked up a glass and chuckled. Why don't you try a cup of sweet lemon? Our boss once went to try to learn cocktail mixing. He has mastered many of the cocktail recipes left behind by Emperor Cell, and he has created the most popular sweet lemon in Orabai on his own. Klein wasn't moved as he calmly replied, I only drink beer. All right. The bartender wasn't in a rush to get the bottle of Southville beer as he said with a smile, Sir, are you an adventurer? Klein nodded without saying an answer. The bartender didn't hesitate as he said with a smile, perhaps you should meet our boss. He's very friendly to new adventurers and is willing to treat them to drinks. Besides, there will be some aid offered to you. Klein, who had come with the intention of purchasing the supplementary ingredients of an impolite master, didn't reject the offer. He took out a brass penny and flicked it before catching it firmly. He placed the penny on the bar counter as a tip to thank the bartender for the information before slowly standing up and walking to the second floor under the lead of a bouncer, where he entered a room at the other end of the corridor. The room was covered with thick, brownish-yellow, soft carpet. There was a faint smell of high-quality coal burning, mixed with the aroma of a cigar. A middle-aged man with his blonde hair combed neatly backwards was leaning on a reclining chair, sucking at his cigar as he read the papers. Surrounding him were 6 bodyguards. Although Klein wasn't a beyonder of the spectated domain, and he was unable to determine any unique traits or the strength of these bodyguards, nor was he from the mystery prior or monster pathway, he could see certain secrets. He could notice things others wouldn't be able to discover, but his spiritual intuition made him believe that these bodyguards were definitely beyonders who could threaten him to a certain extent. The middle-aged man put down the newspaper and pulled out the collars of his black shirt before slowly standing up. He extended his right hand and said, Welcome to Orabai, my adventurer friend. His blue eyes had a smile to them as he looked rather sincere. Klein extended his right palm and smacked palms with him without a word. He was waiting for the man to speak. The middle-aged man pointed to a sofa opposite the reclining chair and chuckled. I'm the boss here, Bilt Brando. I was once an adventurer with quite considerable strength. I've lived to this day and have earned quite a bit. He's very confident with his strength. Thus, daring to directly say it, Klein didn't stand on ceremony as he sat down. He leaned his body slightly forward as he expressionlessly waited for Bilt to begin talking. Seeing no response from the adventurer, Bilt sat down again and sucked at his cigar before leisurely saying, To be honest, there's a motive behind me meeting with every new adventurer. He pointed to the sea map on the desk in the table. He said with a magnetic tone, East from the Roasted Archipelago is where the sea gets progressively messier. The strength of the military and church begin to dwindle, to the point of them only being able to protect their own harbors. The sea around here is a pirate playground, extremely disadvantageous to us adventurers. Therefore, I wish to organize everyone to form a loosely connected alliance, so that we can band together when faced with danger. This alliance doesn't have any strong binding terms. You can choose to turn a blind eye when other adventurers encounter danger, and no one will punish you. However, if you were to encounter a similar situation, don't hope for help to be provided. In addition, I can promise one point, adventurers of the alliance will be able to get the prices of the lowest nature when purchasing items from me. When selling their spoils, they will at least get market price. After finishing the description, Bilt smiled at the new adventurer. He chuckled and asked, What do you think of it? Are you interested in joining this loose alliance? Don't worry, you won't need to make any additional payment. Our purpose is only to render assistance when faced with pirates. Klein nodded. It sounds pretty good. Ha ha, I think so too. I once thought of naming this association the Adventuring Brotherhood, but I felt that brotherhood is overly constrained, so I changed it to Adventurer Association. Bilt said in a self-deprecating manner. Having said that, he lowered his hand with a cigar and smacked his lips. He shook his head and smiled. Sorry, I forgot to ask your name. Klein maintained his posture and replied in a deep voice, Gemman Sparrow. Gemman Sparrow. Bilt's eyelids jumped as his smile instantly stiffened. The guards around him clearly tensed up as though they were facing a formidable enemy. Bilt rapidly composed himself and didn't verify whether he was the real Gemman Sparrow or a cheat who was only passing off as Gemman Sparrow. He chuckled and said, Is there anything you wish to buy? I have quite a lot of good stuff over here. Sonia's golden spring water, Klein said with a calm expression while inwardly feeling cautious. He didn't mention the Drago tree bark since there was a high chance of buying the ingredient at herb stores. Bilt Brando heaved a sigh of relief and smiled. Easy, £30 for 100 milliliters. Trust me, even if you head to Sonia Island, it will only be a few pounds cheaper than this price. Those barbarians from Fisak have sealed off the fountain source, so it's difficult for others to get any of it. Deal. Klein had a rough idea of the price of the golden spring water, and he knew that £30 for 100 milliliters was indeed rather cheap. After completing the deal, Bilt was just about to speak after some deliberation when he suddenly heard knocking. After receiving his permission, a bouncer entered and leaned over, whispering into his ear. Bilt's expression instantly sank as his entire person appeared abnormally cold. He suffused an indescribable killing intent. Indeed, he has quite impressive strength. If he wasn't a famous adventurer in the past, he was a famous pirate. He should be a mid-sequence beyond. Klein looked at him as he calmly made an assessment. Bilt turned his head and said to Klein with some difficulty, Mr. Sparrow, I have matters to tend to. We can have drinks together if the opportunity arises. Okay. Klein slowly got up, without any intention of involving himself in Bilt's matters. Of course, this didn't mean that he wasn't curious, but curiosity was never something that could change the way he did things. After leaving Sweet Lemon, Klein successfully returned to his inn. City of Silver, daytime, which was marked by frequent lightning. After Derek Berg finished practicing all the different beyond the powers of Soda High Priest, he followed the edge of the training field and headed for the Twin Towers. After numerous tarot gatherings, he gradually gained an understanding of the pattern and roughly knew the frequency of the alternating lightning before he would be pulled above the grey fog by Mr. Fool. And now was the final day. Because of this, he had to go to the library to read through historical information involving ancient gods, so as to offer them to Mr. Fool. After passing through the partitioned area of the training field, Derek subconsciously looked inside and saw exploration members resting inside. It was the exploration team led by the 6-member council's chief, Kaliniliad. They had recently finished the exploration based on the information they had received from Jack, and they had returned to the City of Silver, where they were now in quarantine. Derek retracted his gaze with a somewhat heavy heart as he went all the way to the steeple and went to the 3rd floor, where the library was. He was just about to walk to the bookshelf that held all the ancient books on legends when he caught a familiar figure through the corner of his eye. It was a fair and beautiful woman in her 30s. She wore a long black robe embroidered with mysterious purple patterns. Her curly silvery grey hair cascaded down. She was none other than the elder of the 6-member council who had been imprisoned for a prolonged period of time, Lavia Tiffany. She swept her faint grey eyes over as Derek felt his soul being penetrated. He couldn't help but stiffen for a second. "Greetings, Elder Lavia." He hurriedly lowered his head as he pressed his hand to his chest. Lavia walked over and nodded gently. "I've been removed from quarantine." She turned and left after calmly saying that, as though she was making an announcement. Derek stood on the spot as a layer of cold sweat seeped out from his back. "Why has she been released? The 6-member council has already determined that she's all right." Derek thought as his nerves tensed up in an abnormal fashion. Monday afternoon, above the grey fog. Klein placed his elbows on the armrest as he crossed his fingers and watched as beams of crimson light lit up before receding into blurry figures. Then, he heard Miss Justice's brisk greeting. "Good afternoon, Mr. Fool." While Miss Justice was doing the greetings, the hermit Katya maintained her silence as she observed as she did before. She didn't involve herself in matters, as though she was an outsider at this gathering. She watched as Miss Justice and Miss Magician conjured their Russell diary pages to pay off their previous debts. Then, she carefully glanced at Mr. Fool without daring to look straight at him. Yet, she still wasn't able to see further through the special grey fog. Her dark purple eyes were only capable of seeing clothes that were definitely conjured. With the 3 pages of Russell's diary, Klein wasn't in a rush to read it like before. After all, he had already interacted and used the Great Zero sealed artifact and knew what the uniqueness of the Beyond the Pathway looked like. He had even intimidated such a divine artifact, so he believed that regardless of Emperor Russell's content, there was nothing that could shock him greatly. Unless he was given a demoness blessing by some powerhouse with the unique ability and temporarily became a woman, Klein joked inwardly as he surveyed the long bronze table in interest. Ma'am Hermit's curiosity is different from Miss Justice and Company's. She pays great attention to the matter of Russell's diary. Klein retracted his gaze and took note of this discovery. Then, he casually read the yellowish-brown goatskin. The 22nd of April, we plan on entering, to explore the abyss. The 23rd of April, we followed the pitch-black ocean, passed through the liquid-like fog, and arrived at the mountain peak that resembled a monster. Behind it was endless black fog. It seemed to blanket an entire continent. However, looking at the bottom of the peak makes it seem endless and without limit. I had joked with Edwards that if I were to commit suicide by jumping off this cliff, I might never fall to the ground, forever in a state of falling. Upon seeing this, Klein nearly pricked up his brows. He couldn't believe that Russell would dare to organize his own knights and sailors to explore the periphery of the region after seeing the abyss. Isn't he afraid of dying? Legend has it that it's a place that can corrupt everything, causing all life to perish. At this stage, Russell definitely hadn't reached sequence 4, and he wasn't a demigod. He was at best a sequence 5, or even lower. If it were me, I definitely would have turned the boat around and reported it to the church in that instant. Klein gained a deep understanding of the huge difference between him and Russell. In addition, Russell's description of the abyss's periphery had reminded Klein of the mysterious stone doors of Amon's mausoleum. A similar scene had appeared after the Church of Steam and Machinery's Archbishop Haramik's puppet made contact with it. I wonder what Russell discovered there at the very least. He didn't die from his exploration. He still had an exciting life after that. Klein moved his gaze down and read the remaining content on the diary page. The 24th of April, we proceeded down the peak in an attempt to probe deeper. The thick black fog is biting cold, as though it can erode flesh and the soul. Ha ha, luckily, the Dark King I'm on board has certain items that resist this corruption, or I'll suspect that me and my Knights of the Apocalypse will become members of Farron's one undeared legion. It's very quiet, and we didn't discover anything. The 25th of April, we saw devils, but they were in the form of rotting corpses. Behind the black, jagged mountain, below a slush-filled opening that one cannot call a path, there were different devil corpses that were either in normal or unimaginable places. It was as though they had all been killed at the same moment. The 26th of April, either corpses or silenced. There's no end up ahead. The items on the Dark King has begun to show signs of corruption. I've seldom had fear over the past few years, but here, that fear of the unknown is like an invisible hand that clasps my heart tightly. I have to leave. I have to return. I can't stay here any longer. What happened after this? Emperor Cell was very successful in escaping the abyss's periphery, or did he encounter something else? What does the abnormality over there symbolize? An intense battle. Klein subconsciously had some sense of anticipation as he flipped to the second page, only to be let down that it wasn't connected. The 8th of May. My beloved Bernadette is almost 2. The older she grows, the more likable she is. She's indeed a young lady who doesn't let down the excellent genes of her mother and I. Hearing her clearly call me daddy and seeing her bubbly figure, I suddenly felt a sense of satisfaction. Ever since I transmigrated to this world, I've done many things. I can say that some aren't honorable, but I've not felt any shame about it, nor have I ever regretted it. On the one hand, this has to do with me finding it very difficult to curb my desires, making it easy for me to be influenced by my environment. Hey, I have to thank fate that I've not met a desire apostle from the devil pathway. According to the records, I would definitely succumb to beyonders of this sequence. I might even be instantly killed. On the other hand, I still have a sense of alienation from this world. My parents in this world are very nice to me. I've also worked hard to make them proud, but I know that my feelings for them are substantial. Similarly, this is how I treat Matilda. It's more a possessive instinct rather than love. I have to admit that my mental state is like playing a role-playing game in virtual reality. My parents, brothers, and friends are all non-playable characters. I can devote some of my feelings to them, but never anything serious. Therefore, I can join all kinds of corrupted gatherings without any sense of guilt. I can face people I know well in a cold, ruthless manner. It's just like when I played the Elder Scrolls. I could slaughter an entire village just for a chicken. But after Bernadette was born, I realized that I had an additional sense of belonging to this world. I was no longer as estranged from it. This is my child, a living child of mine. Perhaps this is what so-called maturity is. Without children, it's impossible to realize this feeling. No, I don't even have a girlfriend, however, I have to be alert about this state of mind that's mentioned in this entry. It might not exist in the past. But it doesn't mean it wouldn't appear in the future. The higher the sequence, the greater one's godhood is than their humanity. Klein sighed silently as he flipped to the third diary page. The 6th of January, a brand new year, a brand new beginning. After advancing to artisan, I finally have the powers to do that thing. That is to create the mysterious silver plate in my memories. There is a high chance that my transmigration was a result of it. In fact, after I became a savant, I could already recall its appearance, as well as the strange symbols and patterns on its surface. But the past me could clearly sense that I wasn't able to replicate something like that. The 9th of January, I finally succeeded after repeated failures. Holding the silver plate filled with special symbols and patterns, I tried hard to inject my spirituality in a bid to activate it. An endless greyish-white fog seemed to surface before my eyes, but nothing happened. Is it a problem with the material, or am I lacking certain requisites? The 10th of January, according to my recollections of my transmigration experience, I restored my past state, believing that I no longer lacked anything. However, the mysterious silver plate only showed me the strange grey fog. It wasn't able to help me do anything. Since this doesn't work, how did I succeed in my transmigration back then? I temporarily gave up on my attempts, and I destroyed the silver plate I created. Perhaps when I'm a high sequence beyonder and become a demigod, I will have a way to interpret those patterns and symbols to figure out the truth behind my transmigration. Yes, I'll definitely become a demigod. I'm the protagonist of this era. Greyish-white fog. The Emperor saw an endless greyish-white fog after replicating the mysterious silver plate from Earth. Klein's eyes suddenly shrank when he read the diary entry. There happened to be an immutable endless grey fog beneath his feet. Could it be that our transmigrations have to do with this mysterious space? But why is the Emperor unable to enter? But I can. According to the Emperor's diary entries of the last few stages of his life, he definitely didn't crack the mystery of the silver plate. Otherwise, he wouldn't have not thought of this place when he was in his moment of great despair and mania. He wouldn't have not used this place as his crutch. Klein raised his head as his gaze landed outside the ancient palace. He recalled that deep in this mysterious space, there was a staircase of light that seemed to lead to heaven. It seemed to correspond to his sequence. The staircase appeared to be built for giants, and its destination was the grey fog which seemed to support something that stood in mid-air. The secret of our transmigration lies there. Klein made the diary pages in his hand vanish before he leaned back into his chair and said with a normal tone, "You may begin." Derek originally wished to bring forward his request to purchase the Sequence 6 potion formula after Solar High Priest, but Elder Lavia's release made him temporarily abandon his plans. He couldn't wait to mention everything that had happened, wishing to obtain the necessary guidance. Considering how this was still the transaction segment, he held back his desire as he waited in silence. There's something on Little Sun's mind. Something unexpected happened in the City of Silver. Audrey thoughtfully retracted her gaze and similarly didn't request to purchase anything. At this moment, Alger surveyed the area and voiced out, "I need the potion formula of Ocean Songster." Indeed, he's already a Sequence 6, a winged blessed. Isn't he someone from the Church of Storms? Why is he looking for the Ocean Songster's potion formula elsewhere? Obtaining it internally from the Church is a lot easier. He has secrets he wishes to keep from the Church of Storms, or was he just pretending to be someone from the Church of Storms? Katlia instantly had many theories as she gently took note. "I can help you take note." Upon noticing the hermit's response, Alger asked, "Ma'am, is there anything you need? I can search for clues ahead of time, so as to trade for the potion formula." "What do I need?" Katlia silently chuckled, having sensed that the hanged man was probing her with a very ordinary question. Any needs meant clues, ignoring the fact that I've already obtained the potion formula for Sequence 4 Mysticologist to the Mystery Prior pathway, and accumulating points for one of the main ingredients. Even without anything, I have no lack of corresponding resource channels, and far more than one. Katlia had another thought as she recalled the Seed God Scepter which Mr. Fool wielded. She then smiled and said, "I need a mystical item at the demigod level. The kind with acceptable side effects." At that instant, Alger nearly retorted, asking her not to crack a joke. Even in the Church of Storms, one wasn't necessarily capable of obtaining a similar item for years, much less a Beyonder, who was obviously only a mid-sequence Beyonder. If I had an item at the demigod level without any real negative side effects, why wouldn't I keep it for my own use? Alger knew that the hermit was using mockery to respond to his attempt at sounding her out, but he wasn't as irascible as his peers. He slowly took a deep breath and said, "I'll keep an eye out. But ma'am, you should know very well that just an effective clue towards such an item might be enough to cover the cost of an Ocean Songster's potion formula." Very staid, not easily angered. "This is very different from the usual style of the Church of Storms. Was the conclusion of my first observation wrong? He's only disguising himself as a priest of the storm? No, I can't think of it that way. This might also be because he doesn't dare to flare up under Mr. Fool's watch. Or perhaps, he's just an odd one out in the Church of Storms. There might not be many, but it's not extremely rare." Katlia wasn't greedy. She didn't sound him out a second time as she nodded. "I know." As the conversation between the two came to an end, no one made any requests during the transaction segment. A number of members already had the means to obtain whatever they needed, so there was no need to make any requests for purchases. It was mainly Audrey and Force who were waiting for the subsequent potion formulas. Another reason stemmed from their financial situation or circumstances, and they weren't able to make any early expenditures. This included Emmeline, who was filled with desire for the Sanguine's Viscount inheritance, as well as Miss Magician, who wanted a mystical item. Indeed, as everyone slowly cast off their statuses as low sequence Beyonders, advancements are no longer that fast. The rate of transactions will also rapidly drop. In the past, there was basically 1 or 2 deals every week, but now, it might be 2 to 3 weeks. In the future, it might even be 3 to 4 months without knowing whether it was for the better or worse. Klein nodded gently to indicate that it was time to engage in a free exchange. Audrey looked at Derek and waited for him to describe the unexpected situation at the City of Silver. Derek didn't let her expectations down. Before anyone could speak, he earnestly said, "Elder Lavia has been released. I encountered her at the library. Shepherd Lavia has been released. Using flesh and blood, the entire team that she led was corrupted by the true creator, so how can she be without any problems? What is the 6-member council thinking?" Klein originally wanted to say something along the lines of, "If there's nothing wrong with Lavia, I'll chop off my head and gift it to the true creator to be kicked like a ball." However, considering how swears and curses involved deities in them and might lead to terrible consequences, he rationally changed his thoughts. "Of course, I don't have to be that careful with me above the grey fog," he sighed inwardly. "Elder Lavia has been released." That shepherd, Audrey quickly recalled what the name meant. Back then, Little Sun had used Blasphemer Raymond's possession and Mr. Fool's help to expose the fact that the entire exploration team had been corrupted by the true creator. As for the team, it was led by Lavia. Her job as a shepherd happened to correspond to the secret suppliant pathway of the true creator. Yes, Derek nodded earnestly as he looked towards the Hanged Man. Alger thought for a moment before asking, has your chief returned to the City of Silver? Why would Mr. Hanged Man suddenly ask about this? Right. To release such an important figure, it's impossible that the other elders of the six-member council wouldn't wait for the chief's return. If the chief has yet to return, and that they have decided this without his consent, it goes to show that the situation is even more terrible than one can imagine. It was so terrible that they couldn't even await his return. If the chief has already returned, then the reason for releasing Lavia has a high chance to do with the outcome of the exploration. This is because, according to Little Sun, this is the only exploration in recent times for the City of Silver. Sigh, why didn't I think of this? Audrey, you're still lacking in experience. Audrey reflected and consoled herself in thought. Yes, not long ago, Derek was surprised by Mr. Hanged Man's accurate guesses. At this moment, Force, who had been listening quietly, combined what she knew from before and suddenly had an idea. Mr. Sun, could this be the situation? Your chief led the exploration team and that little boy, Jack, to seek out a path that leads to the outside world, but they realized that the power of the true creator is required. Hey, this isn't a lie I'm fabricating, but an inference of the facts. The father of that boy, Jack, belonged to the Aurora Order, and they were seeking the holy residence of the true creator before arriving where you are. Therefore, for the entire City of Silver, your chief decided to release Shepherd Lavia after returning. If that's really the case, Mr. Sun would be in grave danger, Audrey said with worry. Force's words sank Derek's heart. At this moment, Alger shook his head. No, I have the exact opposite belief. Miss Magician's inference is identical to my theory, but I believe this will make it safer for the Sun. Why? Derek's heart calmed down as he asked. Isn't that simple? Balance. Kleins coughed inwardly. The danger of the true creator is noticeable by any sentient creature with eyes and a brain. Your chief will definitely not put all his chips on him. He definitely needs a force that can counterbalance the true creator. As for you, the one who exposed their ploy, you were possessed by Blasphemer Aemon, so you might represent another possibility. The more Lavia and company wish harm upon you, the more the chief and the other elders will protect you. This way, they would turn a blind eye to whatever suspicious aspects you didn't manage to erase, Alger explained simply. This ends up being a silver lining. Force was stunned. Mr. Hanged Man makes a lot of sense when it comes to analyzing matters and the situation. I'm still far from matching him. Audrey felt somewhat depressed. She even thought of puffing her cheeks, but she immediately realized that it wasn't an elegant act. All she could do was keep those thoughts to herself. For the rest of the members, Emlyn, who didn't know much about Lavia, had a hard time keeping up. However, he knew about Jack and the repeated cycles, so he was barely able to understand the discussion. In order to break out of the City of Silver's conundrum, they released a danger that has the true creator involved. Emlyn inwardly made a guess. Compared to him, Katlia couldn't understand a word. She felt as though she was from a completely different world compared to the other members. I actually have a feeling of admiration despite my incomprehension of what they said. The last time I had this feeling was several years ago. Back then, I was still very weak. There were some inklings in the previous tarot gatherings, especially so when it involves the City of Silver, but never has it been as serious as this time. Also, why are they discussing the true creator and Blasphemer Aemon so naturally? And it should be the Blasphemer Aemon I know of. They're only mid-sequence beyond is what have they actually done in the past? Katlia's confidence as a powerhouse suffered a setback at that very moment. After hearing Mr. Hanged Man's analysis, Derek first heaved a sigh of relief before asking with tense nerves, could this result in our City of Silver being destroyed by the fallen creator? He originally wished that Mr. Hanged Man could provide him with an answer that could relieve him, but he ended up hearing the man say in a deep voice, the possibility can't be ruled out. Then what should I do? Derek earnestly sought advice. Under the situation of us not understanding what your chief and the other elders of the six-member council are up to, I cannot provide you with any suggestions. But I don't think you need to be in such a panic. Alger raised his head to glance at Mr. Fool, who was silently looking at the members from the end of the long bronze table. Tracing his gaze, Derek subconsciously looked over and saw Mr. Fool, whose extremely blurry figure was covered in the grey fog. He instantly felt a sense of serenity, and he couldn't help but recall that holy and powerful angel. Although I've foiled several of the true creator's ploys, I'll definitely not last a second. If I were to really clash with him, the situation will devolve into the Fool coming to his doorstep. But the true creator finding the Fool completely lacking, Klein maintained his casual listening state, without saying a word or showing any expression. Derek retracted his gaze and said to Alger, Mr. Hanged Man, thank you for your help. I will try to figure out what Chief and the others are planning. With the matter coming to an end, Katlia deliberated before saying, was the Blasphemer Aemon you were talking about before referring to the ancestor of the Aemon family in the 4th Epoch Tudor Empire, the son of the creator? Son of the creator? Audrey was stunned by what Mam Hermit said. She instinctively turned her head to the end of the long bronze table and discovered Mr. Fool sitting there calmly, as though he was tacitly confirming Aemon's other identity. The son of the creator. Alger was stunned by the hermit's description as he couldn't help but twitch his brows. However, he didn't directly inquire further because this could very likely expose certain matters. Besides, he was very confident that there would be other members asking. The son of the creator, Force asked with piqued interest. She never expected that Aemon had such a shocking identity, aside from the titles like Blasphemer and King of Angels. She was filled with curiosity over this. Katlia swept her a look and said without a change in tone, legend has it that back when the original creator split into the various deities and races, his body produced 2 babies. One of them was Blasphemer Aemon. The mural inside Aemon's mausoleum was somewhat different from your description. Back when Aemon and Adam was born, the creator had just awoken and withdrew the authorities of the ancient gods. He was seated high on a holy mountain and was surrounded by angels as they praised him. There were no signs of him dying or splitting. That mural does have something in common with the City of Silver's historical records. Perhaps the creator had really awoken twice. And perhaps the original creator and Aemon's father, the creator as recorded by the City of Silver, and the same person. Both of them have an inheritance relationship. As Klein listened to Mam Hermit's description, he began theorizing. Aemon is actually the son of the creator. Such a status is in no way inferior to the true gods. As for Mr. Fool, our tarot club was able to easily purify his avatar and stop his possession. Audrey recalled the past matters and suddenly felt that she had unknowingly exceeded many ordinary beyonders. The circles and levels of knowledge exposure that the two groups had differed by more than 100 times. She asked with piqued interest, Mam Hermit, do you know the other son of the creator? Adam, Katlia answered succinctly. Audrey was clearly taken aback. This was because her question only required a yes or no. After receiving the confirmation that she knew, she would ask for the details and make it clear that she was willing to pay for it. Who knew that Mam Hermit had directly given her the name, Adam? She doesn't seem to care too much about such information. She's in control of a lot of information. Audrey managed to infer certain matters through this detail as her eyes darted about. I've never heard of an important figure named Adam. I haven't either. Apart from being recorded as the son of the creator, it's like he has never appeared before. There are nearly no traces of him in the history of the Fourth Epoch, Catleya answered frankly. This Adam is very mysterious. I'm already rather well versed in the Fourth Epoch's 3 empires of Solomon, Judah, and Transoist, as well as the angel families that come under them. Yet, I've never heard of him before. If it wasn't for our Rhodes, who live-streamed the Church of Steam and Machinery's exploration of Amon's mausoleum, I wouldn't have even known his name. Has he long perished? Or is he hidden in the dark while scheming something? Klein sighed inwardly. Audrey subconsciously glanced at Mr. Hanged Man and discovered him shaking his head as well. Amon is a king of angels, so it doesn't make sense for Adam to not be one. There should be records in the City of Silver. Audrey looked at Derek. For some reason, Derek easily understood what was on Miss Justice's mind. He said in slight embarrassment, we do not know about Adam, just like how we don't know about Amon. I was previously searching for ancient tomes related to the King of Angels. I believe that I was lacking in clearance as my sequence was still low at that time. I will continue searching for information on this. King of Angels. Catleya moved her fingers indiscernibly as she memorized the phrase. She knew that Miss Justice would definitely answer if she asked, so without waiting, she directly asked, Amon is a king of angels that all of you are referring to? Yes, to thank Ma'am Hermit for her generosity, Audrey explained in detail. In the records of the City of Silver, the Creator had many angels attending to him. Among them, the leaders of the angels who were closest to the throne of God were deemed king of angels. We haven't managed to confirm many king of angels. One of them is the angel of fate Ouroboros, who originates from the ancient tomes of the City of Silver. His title is Tail Devra. The second is Medisai, who Mr. Fool happened to mention. We are still unsure of his title. The third is a guess. We suspect that Amon is the angel of time among the king of angels. Since he is a king of angels, Adam, who is also a son of the Creator, is very likely one as well. Haven't managed to confirm many. I don't even know the term king of angels, but you have already grasped half of them. That's not many. None of your sequences are higher than mine. Catleya nearly became speechless. Only at this point did Emlyn really understand the meaning behind the king of angels. He decided to use these names to seek out traces of the king of angels via the secret historical records the Sanguine had in their control after he returned to the real world. Catleya fell silent for 2 seconds before saying, Mr. Sun, you were once possessed by Amon. Yes, it was his avatar, Derek answered honestly. However, he was purified by Mr. Fool. I wasn't injured at all. Purified by Mr. Fool, Catleya couldn't hold back the urge to look at the end of the long bronze table. She originally imagined that she had a general idea of Mr. Fool's state, believing that he was still in a state of awakening and was unable to use much of his powers. This was why he sought the identity of Sea God and obtained the scepter. However, the present situation shook the foundations of her speculation. She felt that Mr. Fool was like an iceberg. What was hidden beneath the surface was even more terrifying and unfathomable. He easily thwarted Amon's plans under certain situations. He can briefly break through the restrictions and produce strength at the level of a god. Catleya's heart sank as she didn't ask further. She cautiously shut her mouth. At this moment, Audrey had thought of something that puzzled her because of this topic. She proactively asked, Ma'am Hermit, after Amon's avatar was purified by Mr. Fool, a worm with 12 transparent rings was left behind. It's said to be a worm of time. Is that correct? Catleya recalled for 2 seconds before saying, yes. Which pathway does it belong to? I mean, which beyond the pathway does the blasphemer pathway belong to? Audrey pressed out of curiosity. Catleya answered directly without any thought, the Marauder pathway. Legend has it that at the saint or angel level, they are able to fool the fate and cheat the rules, becoming a parasite of time. Sounds very impressive. Audrey marveled inwardly before asking, then, what can a worm of time be used for? Nice question. Klein secretly cheered for Miss Justice. He pumped himself up as he waited for Ma'am Hermit to give the answer. He happened to have a worm of time in his junk pile. It's a material with rich spirituality and unique effects. It can be used in particular rituals or be used to create high-level charms. But as for how, I'm not sure. After Catleya answered, she suddenly sighed. She recalled the nightmare of being constantly pursued by knowledge, as well as the massive amount of information that could seemingly burst her brains. But even so, she still didn't know a lot. If the hidden sage hadn't gone mad and could provide knowledge bit by bit, I'd actually be more than happy to learn from him. Catleya secretly sighed. All that matters is that it's useful as for how it's used. I have other people to consult. Klein controlled the world with great satisfaction and looked at Emlyn. Mr. Moon, I have something I would like to communicate with you in private. Aren't the transactions over? Emlyn nodded, feeling somewhat uncertain. Okay, the world immediately requested for Mr. Fool's permission and successfully obtained the privilege of isolating everyone. Then, he looked at Emlyn White and said, I wish for you to present to me every action which Leonard Mitchell made in your memories. Why? Emlyn asked in puzzlement. It involved certain secrets. Klein controlled the world to answer succinctly. His true goal wasn't to buy that mystical item, but to observe Leonard Mitchell. That fellow has deep secrets the world as well. For an investigation, he was willing to spend £7,500. However, the mystical item is indeed powerful. Isn't the world constantly seeking a way to eliminate the mental corruption in a beyond a characteristic? This is likely useful. Emlyn suppressed his wandering thoughts as he seriously recalled Leonard Mitchell from his point of view. With Mr. Fool's help, he conjured a video in the form of streaming light. When the streaming light landed in the world's hands, Klein quickly browsed through it. He confirmed that Leonard really knew the existence of the Grandpa, but he was unable to determine if he understood the danger. Temporarily suppressing any corresponding thoughts, Klein removed the isolation barriers and allowed the Tarot Club members to continue. At this moment, Audrey was reminded of something by Mr. World's private communication. She hurriedly looked at Force and asked in concern, Miss Magician, did you discover any abnormalities at Williams Street? That will require Mr. World to answer you, Force said, having been put into a difficult position. Without waiting for Miss Justice to speak again, Klein controlled the world and hoarsely replied, there were abnormalities. But I have already informed the Church of Evernight and the Church of Steam. If there are any future problems, I might require your help. All right. Audrey heaved a sigh of relief. Informed the Church of Evernight and Steam. This Catleya found the description ludicrous. From what she knew, a secret organization like the Tarot Club was a natural enemy of the official Beyonders. There was no room for any compromises between the two. But the way the world had dealt with it and the words he used had made it seem like the Tarot Club was an organization that cooperated with the official Beyonders. Colored by these feelings, she listened to the rest of the conversation before bowing and bidding farewell when Mr. Fool made the closing remark. Soon, Klein was the only one left above the grey fog. Second floor of the Sweet Lemon Bar, in the boss's room. Bilt Brando held a cigar as he stood by the window. He was looking out, and his eyes were out of focus as he wore a dark and terrifying expression. At this moment, a bodyguard entered, bent his back slightly, and carefully said, Sir, Suthoth has returned from the east. Let him in. Bilt tried hard to correct his expression. Suthoth was his assistant, an important member of the Adventurer Association. In less than a minute, Suthoth, who was dressed in a linen shirt, brown jacket, and red headscarf, walked in. He looked to be in his 30s and had bronze skin. He had recessed eye sockets and a black moustache below and under his lips. He was obviously someone who spent most of his time at sea. Suthoth bowed rather informally and sized up Bilt Brando. Boss, something happened. Yes, something happened. From the looks of it, it will fail. Bilt didn't keep the matter from him as he sighed. I have no idea how I'm going to answer that important figure. Without waiting for Suthoth to answer, he asked, have there been any changes at the Eastern Front? Still the same as usual. The pirates are still after every ship they can plunder. They even target each other. The Navy is only able to guard the various colonial posts, and they're barely able to maintain smooth passage through the sea routes while protecting the relatively important ships. There are often sea battles with both sides obtaining victories at times, Suthoth said as he shrugged his shoulders. The Eastern Front of the Sonia Sea is a pirate's playground, Bilt sighed in agreement. Suthoth thought for a moment and added, there has been some recent news from the islands on the Eastern Front. Apparently it first originated from the Black Death. Vice Admiral Ailment, what news is it? Bilt asked, his interest piqued. Suthoth said with a solemn and excited tone, Vice Admiral Ailment really encountered an assassination attempt and was seriously injured. And the person who attacked her was the adventurer, Gemman Sparrow. Gemman Sparrow? Bilt blurted out. Yes, it's him. He really is a powerhouse at the level of a pirate admiral. Even if it was a sneak attack, it happened on the Black Death. There were so many infamous pirates around, but he managed to successfully escape after dealing a heavy blow to Vice Admiral Ailment. He later hunted Ormtown Merthyr, Suthoth answered with affirmation while sighing. Bilt staggered before sighing. That's important news. There are very few powerhouses at the pirate admiral level among adventurers. To be able to deal a heavy blow to a pirate admiral on her flagship while alone, such an operation can only be done if one is absolutely confident in themselves or crazy enough. Only a maiden will infiltrate a pirate admiral's flagship in an attempt to assassinate her, instead of finding another spot. Having said that, his expression changed slightly. I met an adventurer named Gemman Sparrow last night. For real? Suthoth's pupils shrank as he asked solemnly. I can't be sure since I've never met the real Gemman Sparrow, or seen his photograph or portrait. Bilt shook his head. Suthoth thought for a moment and said, you can search for the newspapers from the Rorsted Archipelago to confirm his identity. So many days have passed, there should be tourists that would have brought over the corresponding news report and Sonia Morning Post. Yes, the government offices, police stations, churches, and charity organizations will subscribe to the important newspapers of the Rorsted Archipelago. The Rorsted Archipelago was the biggest colonial grounds of the Loan Kingdom in the central Sonia Sea. Its influence radiated outward, so there was no doubt that Orabai Island, which was within a distance of 3 days of travel, was part of its domain of influence. The official organizations and churches all subscribed to the newspapers and magazines of the area, so any non-crucial news would be received in 3 to 4 days. All right. Bilt nodded as he probed deeper. Do you have the exact details of Gemman Sparrow's assassination attempt on Vice Admiral Ailment? Suthoth thought for a moment and said, it's said that Gemman Sparrow is able to change into anyone, just like Vice Admiral Hurricane Kinang knows. It's with that power that he successfully infiltrated the Black Death and found an opportunity to carry out the assassination. He can change into anyone. Bilt's eyes lit up. No, that won't do. That's a crazy guy who dares to infiltrate the Black Death to assassinate Vice Admiral Ailment. He causes one to instinctively fear him and distance themselves from him. The light in Bilt's eyes dimmed. Furthermore, I don't even know if he's the real one or not. He subconsciously shook his head. I wonder when the Netoxin machinery hive mind will take action and deal with the abnormality at Williams Street. I hope they do it as soon as possible. Amidst his thoughts, Klein left the grey fog and returned to the real world. After some consideration, he took out a piece of paper and laid it out on a brown desk. He wrote with a dark red fountain pen, asking about Mr. Azaic's recent situation before mentioning how he had discovered that someone had a parasite in him while he was searching for a mystical item that could steal the beyond the powers of others. Following that, he seemingly asked in passing if there was a way to avoid the parasite and informed the host. With this as a topic starter, he added how he learned from others about information regarding the worm of time that was related to high-sequence beyonders from the Marauder pathway. He also mentioned that he knew that such an item could be used as a sacrificial item in important rituals or as a material in high-level charms. However, he had no idea how to produce them. Klein put down the fountain pen, folded the letter, and brought the copper whistle to his lips. He blew at it forcefully. White bones spewed out like a fountain, forming a gigantic skeleton messenger. But this time, the messenger didn't pour out from downstairs, and it instead tore through the ceiling like many times before, looking down at the summoner from above. Klein knew that this wasn't because the messenger had become impolite again, but because he was staying on the first floor of an inn. He flicked his wrist and threw the letter like a dart, making it land accurately in the messenger's huge bony hand. The flames in the messenger's eye sockets flickered as though it was observing Klein, but ultimately, nothing happened. Its body disintegrated into a waterfall made of bones as they drilled into the ground. After everything was done, Klein didn't spread open the paper crane. He erased what had been written and wrote the same content to seek advice from the Snake of Mercury, Winoseptin. This was because he realized something terrible. The paper crane wasn't a mystical item or beyond a weapon. It was an ordinary piece of paper that had been folded. After repeatedly having its content erased by an eraser, it was beginning to show signs of its structural integrity failing. In a few more tries, it might directly tear. I'll leave extremely important matters that require contact before considering it. For example, only when Mr. Azaic isn't sure how to bypass the Grand Part to warn Leonard. Klein shook his head silently and rapidly packed up the items on his desk. In addition, he didn't dare to use the radio transceiver to contact Arrows recently. This was because the powerhouse sent by the True Creator was likely still loitering around the area in search for the All Black Eyes aura. The scent of the grey fog was also equally able to attract the True Creator's attention, allowing him to inform his believers. Today, I'll continue being a tourist and relax. Tomorrow, I'll begin searching for an opportunity to do real acting. Klein retracted his thoughts, draped on his coat, and took his top hat before walking out the inn. He planned on heading to the mountains outside Orabai Harbor to watch the sunset. This thought stemmed from a popular novel. Its author's name was Ian Marstein. This gentleman was born in Odora and had decided to permanently reside in Backland after the age of 20. His books had introduced the sunset at Mount St. Draco with immense feelings, believing that it was the most beautiful scene he had ever seen. Klein rode a carriage out the city and walked to the foot of Mount St. Draco. He took an hour before arriving at the peak of the not-so-tall mountain. Time passed as the sun slowly set, making the blue sea situated to the left of the mountain peak appear like a sea of fire. As for the emerald green forest and the vast fields on the right, they seemed to be gilded. All the colors bloomed with the final touches of radiance in that instant before darkness gradually approached until it became dark. Ships entered the harbor as carriages drove into the city. The busy people began returning home on the roads parallel to the wheat fields and fruit gardens. When darkness enveloped the entire land, specks of warm light lit up one after another inside and outside the city. They were like resplendent gems that dotted the velvet night sky. It's really beautiful, Klein admired for a moment until all the lights from each family were reflected in his eyes. He turned around in silence and walked down the mountain path. Accompanied by the dark trees, he returned to the foot of the mountain before walking for some distance until he hired a carriage along the periphery of the port city. The carriage stable proceeded forward as the dim yellow halos from the iron-black elegant street lamp silently illuminated the ground, receding backwards into the distance. After some time, Klein returned to his inn. He took out his key and opened his door. There was a bed, a desk, and a chair in the room, silently sitting there in the rich darkness. They silently reflected some of the crimson luster. Klein closed the door very gently and walked to the window. He stood in the shadows created by the curtains and remained motionless for quite some time. The lights outside were still bright. Early the next morning, Klein turned on the tap and patted his face with ice-cold water, rejuvenating his entire body. He had already thought of a way to engage in true acting. It was still the hospital, where death could occur at any moment. In the past, Klein had only circled the area without much focus. Loitering around had made it hard for him to find any suitable targets. This time, he planned on using some time of volunteer work to stay in the hospital for prolonged periods of time. He could provide hospice to the dying patients who temporarily didn't have their family beside them. By doing so, he could await the targets he needed. After having breakfast, Klein arrived at 10 Black Forest Street and entered the All Rabbi Hospice Foundation. This was a charity organization of the Church of the Evernight Goddess. One of its responsibilities was to provide the various hospitals with trained volunteers. Klein came to the registration booth and saw the female employee reading the papers. Hence, he lightly tapped the table to attract her attention. "Is there something I can help you with?" The lady lowered the papers and asked. "I wish to do some volunteer work," Klein said succinctly. "Name." The lady looked up at him. Suddenly, her eyes froze as her right hand trembled. The fountain pen she had just picked up fell to the ground. In the papers in front of her was a portrait that looked almost realistic. The portrait's owner was that of the crazy and dangerous adventurer, Gemman Sparrow. All Rabbi Hospice Foundation. The lady responsible for volunteer registration hurriedly bent her back as she frantically searched for the fountain pen which had dropped. At this moment, Klein also noticed that she was reading a news report paper from a few days ago. It was back when his portrait and escapades were published. This area subscribes to newspapers from the Rorsted Archipelago as well. From the time it takes to sail between the places, it's true that they could only read news from 3 to 4 days ago. If I had known earlier, I would have worn a new face and thought of a fake name before coming. Klein stood in front of the desk as he thought helplessly. The lady in her 30s finally picked up the fountain pen, raised her head, and said with a trembling voice, "Why, you want to do volunteer work?" "Yes," Klein gave an affirmative answer. "But you're an adventurer," the mortified lady stammered for an excuse. She instinctively didn't want such an extremely dangerous person to do volunteer work. Being famous isn't necessarily a good thing, forget it. "I'll switch my appearance and name before coming again." Klein had the intention of giving up as he questioned her without any emotion. "Who made the rules that adventurers can't do volunteer work?" The lady responsible for the registration was on the brink of tears as she blurted out, "It wasn't me." The volunteer registration room became abnormally quiet. Klein was first taken aback before he felt like laughing. It took him a great deal of effort to maintain Gemman Sparrow's image. After the lady calmed down, she sensed that her answer was clearly problematic. She forced a smile and said, "No, I mean this isn't regulated by anyone. My impression of adventurers is that they are very busy. They need to be out at sea and have very little time to do volunteer work." "That's them," Klein answered succinctly. The lady held her palm to her mouth as she revealed a smile. "All right, I'll immediately help you with your registration." As she spoke, she pulled out a form and handed it over. "Please fill it in. We will provide the corresponding training and volunteer jobs according to your requests. We will contact you, or you can always come over to inquire for any updates." She had already made up her mind not to put Gemman Sparrow's form into the docket. Instead, she would hand it directly to the Foundation's person in charge and the police. "Goddess, why is this dangerous fellow here to do volunteer work?" She secretly drew a crimson moon on her chest. Klein nodded in silence. He took the form and sat down. Picking up a fountain pen, he began filling in his basic information. During this process, a man in a doctor's gown entered and asked, "Joanna, are there any new volunteers?" "We'll begin the morning training." Joanna, who was in charge of the registration, had the intention to shake her head. However, Gemman Sparrow, who sat opposite her, gave her an intense sense of pressure even though he remained silent and didn't raise his head. She didn't dare to lie. That is, she first replied to the man and then looked at Klein. "Mr. Sparrow, do you wish to receive the basic training for volunteer work now, or do you wish to wait until tomorrow?" Klein thought for a moment before saying, "Now." He planned on familiarizing himself first, allowing him to show his professionalism at volunteer work after changing his identity. That way, he could quickly help out at the hospital. Joanna clearly drew a breath and said, "Then follow Mr. Gravier after you are done filling in the form." "All right," Klein replied calmly. Half an hour later, the calm and polite adventurer who had his madness hidden in him stared at the abnormally dirty toilet in front of him. He held his breath and said, "Scrub it." "Right, you have already received the basic training on how to carry a patient. However, that isn't the most common task we do at the hospital. We are mainly in charge of cleaning a patient's vomit or changing and washing the linen, as well as maintaining the cleanliness of the washroom. Hey, matters such as bandaging wounds are left to the professionals. We only need you to have the basics grasped." Gravier pinched his nose as he pointed to the stained toilets. "A volunteer has already demonstrated it to you. Please begin." "This is very different from what I imagined." Completely different. Klein's first reaction was to turn his back and leave, but he ultimately picked up the cleaning tools with a deadpan expression. He held back his disgust and went over before crouching down. Then, he leaned back a little as he extended his right arm. At noon, Klein took off his white gown and wore his top hat before leaving All Rabbi Hospice Foundation with a cold expression. He had serious second thoughts about continuing the volunteer work to find opportunities for real acting. Only when his carriage arrived at the Sweet Lemon Bar did he steel his resolve to continue the attempt. "I hope to become an Imbrite master in 1350 and digest the potion, so as to begin seeking the clues to become a high-sequence beyonder." Klein emphasized his goal once again. He retracted his emotions and entered the Sweet Lemon Bar. He spent 8 pence for apple cider marinated pork ribs and a piece of buttered bread. Together with a cup of rye beer costing 1.5 pence, they formed Klein's lunch. He finished eating in an unhurried fashion before using a handkerchief to wipe his mouth. He said to the bartender, "Where's your boss? I have something to talk to him about." Since he had already verbally agreed to join the Adventurer Association, Klein naturally didn't plan on missing the opportunity to use this loose alliance. He planned to ask Bilt Brando to contact unaffiliated artisans or artisans who were willing to moonlight. He wanted an artisan to create an item like Azite's copper whistle, so he didn't need to set up a ritual and chant the incantations every time he summoned his messenger. It was complicated, troublesome, and a waste of time. Of course, if Bill Brando didn't know an artisan, Klein didn't plan on forcing the matter. After all, joining the Adventurer Association didn't require him to pay. The bartender pointed to the staircase and said, "He's on the second floor. If you've already agreed to join his association and have seen those bodyguards, then they'll let you up." Klein nodded indiscernibly and slowly got up before walking towards the staircase. Indeed, no guards stopped him. Only when he reached the second floor did a bodyguard approach him to inquire about his purpose. Thanks to his reputation as Gem and Sparrow, he easily met Bill Brando again. He also saw an unfamiliar man beside him. "My friend, Soot Hothian, an important member of the association," Bill pointed to the man in a red headscarf. At the same time, he exchanged looks with the man and saw the seriousness and puzzlement in each other's eyes. After a simple greeting, Klein got a chair to sit on. He directly said, "I wish to obtain the help of an artisan. I wonder if the association is able to provide any clues." Artisan. Bill sucked at his cigar and paused for a few seconds. He deliberated for a moment before saying, "I do know an artisan, but he's unwilling to meet strangers. This will bring him grave danger. If you have any requests, then I can be the middleman. I believe I have the required reputation to do so." To most churches, mid and low sequence beyonders without any evil intentions could be ignored at times. However, artisans needed to be dealt with indiscriminately. Otherwise, the mystical items they created could flood the markets, bringing about extreme unrest to human society. From the looks of it, the Adventurer Association, which Bill organized, isn't just wasting money. At the very least, it has amassed quite a lot of resources and information channels. Klein took out the Murloc bladder which he had long prepared. "I wish to make this into a ring, mainly to provide one with underwater mobility." He temporarily didn't mention the messenger, planning to test the artisan's ability and Bill's reputation. If the messenger summoning incantation became widely known, it would create quite a bit of trouble. A sequence 9 beyond the characteristic isn't expensive. Even if Bill succumbs to greed and usurps the created mystical item, it doesn't matter. After all, I have a bunch of charms from the Sea God domain. Furthermore, it's not like I can't find him to settle the debt. This is better. For him to be able to organize an adventurer association, he definitely has plenty of money and ingredients. As Klein's thoughts reeled, he couldn't help but size up Bilt. In that instant, Bilt shuddered for some baffling reason. All the hair on his back stood up. He felt as though Gem and Sparrow's eyes looked like he had seen a treasure trove. As treasure, this wasn't a good experience at all. Bilt glanced at Soot and forced a smile. "This is a Murloc's bladder, right? Making a material at this level into a mystical item basically wouldn't have any accidents. The artisan's fee is £150. You can pay me after it's crafted." A very fair price. Klein nodded silently as he threw the Murloc bladder over. "After Bilt caught it," he added, "help me ask the artisan if he has the ability to fix the summoning ritual of a spirit world creature onto an item which can be used for at least a year." "No problem." Bilt heaved a sigh of relief before signaling to Soot with his eyes. Soot rubbed his depressed eye socket and took a step forward. "Mr. Gemon, would you be interested in heading out to sea soon? We already have a few pretty good ships. They're planning on hiring manpower to the eastern front to hunt pirates." "Interesting, but my focus right now is to digest my potion." Klein calmly shook his head. Soot's smile froze before vanishing. He didn't say anything further, as it was a rejection from an adventurer at the pirate admiral level. He and Bilt had already found the relevant newspapers and confirmed the authenticity of Gem and Sparrow. Klein slowly stood up and pressed his top hat to his chest before bowing slightly. "Thank you for your help." Bilt's facial muscles twitched a little as though he was holding back something. He had something to say, but he wasn't able to say it out loud. Finally, he slowly drew in a breath and smiled. "I believe we should hope for a pleasant partnership." Klein sensed Bilt's and Soot's abnormality, but he suppressed his puzzlement and didn't ask. "I can't ask. There will be trouble once I ask. I have to focus on digesting the potion." Klein turned around and walked to the door before turning the doorknob. "Mr. Gemon," Bilt suddenly said. The corner of Klein's mouth twitched as he calmly looked back. "Nothing. Ha. I mean, as a member of the association, you can have cheaper drinks over here," Bilt said with a forced smile. "Do you think I would have pressed on the matter?" TSK. Klein gently nodded and opened the door to leave. After watching his back vanish, Bilt stared in a daze for 2 seconds before letting out a long sigh. Inside the room, Soot pressed down on the edges of his eyes when he heard Bilt's sigh. He said in a deep voice, "Boss, that important figure will arrive the day after tomorrow." Bilt's expression turned serious as he looked back. "I know. We only have 2 choices. First, we ignore whether Gem and Sparrow is worth trusting, and we entrust him with the mission. We can only hope for the best outcome. Second, we immediately abandon our business in Orabai, leaving with our cash and jewelry to become pirates at sea. I have the confidence to make most sailors and adventurers on the pirate hunt to follow us." Soot paused before adding, "Boss, back when you were an adventurer, leading our ship and hunting pirates, you were always this decisive and tenacious. I believe you have already made your decision. There's no need for me to do anything else." Ha. There's no need to suck up to me." Bilt smiled bitterly. "I'm no longer the fearless pirate hunter who didn't fear blood or gunfire from before. Long periods of an easy and comfortable life have dulled my will. I don't even wish to seek out chances to advance. Those companions who had turned into monsters still live on in my mind." Phew, he exhaled as his expression instantly turned solemn. "However, you're right. We don't have time to hesitate. We have to immediately make a decision." Having said that, Bilt turned his head and gestured at the window with his chin. Soot was taken aback for a moment before understanding what his boss meant. After leaving the Sweet Lemon Bar, Klein strolled by the side of the street, planning to hire a carriage at the crossroads. At this moment, he heard a window open above him and saw a figure jump down. Perhaps after experiencing the terrifying incidents involving the Antigonus family's notebook and Banzi Harbor's strange telegraph office, Klein's first reaction was that Bilt Brando was dead. He had suddenly died after his visit and was thrown down from upstairs, falling to the ground with his eyes wide open. This was just like how he saw Ray Beaver's mother dead in a reclining chair back then. The body was highly decomposed, and the eyeball fell to the floor because of the external disturbance. Similar thoughts flashed through his mind as Klein discerned the figure who had fallen from upstairs to be Soot Hothian, not Bilt Brando. Furthermore, he looked normal and was clearly still alive. Oh no, here comes trouble. Klein's heart skipped a beat, having a more accurate guess. If it were himself, he definitely would have pretended not to see Soot Hothian jump off the building to intercept him, running before the man could even say a word and until he shook him off his tail. It would be akin to how Admiral of Stars was being pursued by knowledge. Unfortunately, I'm currently Gem and Sparrow. A crazy adventurer wouldn't flee because of such trivial matters. Getting to know myself better is an additional perk. Klein halted and watched as Soot firmly landed on the ground. He bowed with his hand placed over his chest. Mr. Gemman Sparrow, we have a very important task to entrust you. Here it comes, Klein calmly replied. I won't be that free lately. This wouldn't waste too much of your time. You can first listen to what it is about before considering to reject or accept it, Suthoth said earnestly. I'm afraid I have no choice but to accept it after hearing it. Actually, it's still all right. If Bilt Brando and Suthoth Young threaten me to take the mission, I don't mind changing them into gold pounds and beyond their ingredients. Klein thought it through seriously and discovered that he didn't need to have too many reservations out at sea. Having the strength of a pirate admiral basically made him unstoppable in most areas. He took out the pocket watch in his inner pocket and opened it. I'm giving you 5 minutes. All right, that's enough. Suthoth pointed at the entrance to the Sweet Lemon Bar behind Klein. Returning to the room, Klein glanced at the wall clock and said coldly, you still have 3 minutes and 12 seconds. His attitude gave Bilt a baffling sense of ease. He began to believe that Gemman Sparrow definitely had the capabilities to complete the mission. Mr. Gemman, I heard that you can transform into anyone, just like how Vice Admiral Hurricane Kilangos was formerly capable of doing so, Bilt hurriedly asked. Who revealed this matter? Klein pricked up his brows as his gaze towards Bilt turned gloomy. If news of Gemman Sparrow being able to transform into anyone spread, it was quite troublesome for Klein. This was because this made others either think of creeping hunger, making them think of Kilangos' death, or they would think that he was a beyonder who had certain secrets and was suspected to be a faceless. The former would attract the attention of the Twilight Hermit Order, while the latter would attract the attention of the Church of the Evernight Goddess, who would send personnel to investigate. Of course, the Church of the Evernight Goddess wasn't a powerful force at sea, so Klein didn't need to worry too much about it. He just didn't wish to be in conflict with the Nighthawks. If it happened, he had no choice but to abandon his identity as Gemman Sparrow. This was at the critical point where more and more people knew of the crazy and powerful adventurer who had a soft heart while he was being acknowledged and gaining feedback. Bill sensed the change in Gemman Sparrow's gaze as he tensed up. He chuckled and said, this was news released from the Black Death. Tracy, she's trying to seek revenge on me by doing so. One day, I'll successfully hunt her. Klein nodded slightly and said, you can think of it as real. He didn't explain how he received his powers of shapeshifting, as this didn't match Gemman Sparrow's persona. Bill heaved a sigh of relief and said after 2 seconds of silence, we are helping an important figure to search for a stand-in. Under Gemman Sparrow's ambiguous gaze, he explained in detail that important figure needs to independently deal with a secret matter that he doesn't want others to know of. Therefore, he needs a stand-in to represent him in dealing with his daily affairs. He would meet different guests and socialize with his mistress without revealing a problem. He will take 3 to 5 days to return. We had already found someone who looked like him, spending a great deal of time to correct his posture and accent, and we had informed the good news to the important figure, who knew that the tramp would overeat and suddenly die last night. That important figure is about to begin his operation. We do not have the time to look for another person who looks like him, so we can only seek your help. Isn't this the true acting opportunity I've been looking for? Klein was moved. However, he sharply noticed one point. To be addressed as an important figure by Bilt, leader of the Adventurer Association, it definitely meant that the person was an important figure. Matters that happened around an important figure were often not simple. It contained quite a considerable risk. Klein thought for a moment before asking in a deep tone, do you think that this matter will be dangerous? No, as long as you aren't exposed, there shouldn't be any danger. You need to represent the important figure and appear at social conventions. Hey, no one would dare assassinate him. Yes, I know what you're worried about. You're afraid that this important figure would silence everyone who knows about this matter after it's done. Don't worry, the pirates have fabricated plenty of vicious rumors about him, so even if this matter succeeds, no one will believe it even if you divulge this in the future. It will only be treated as a joke, Bill said with a smile as he spread his hands. Klein no longer bothered with the topic and switched to asking, what kind of payment are you offering? £1,000, and 3 chances to get the artisan to make something for you. Hey, I'll pay for all expenses apart from the materials. Bill made an offer which he believed Gemman Sparrow wasn't unable to resist based on what had been previously entrusted to him. It's not bad, besides, it gives me a chance to do true acting. Klein took a look at the wall clock and said, I'll return and consider. I'll give you the answer in the evening. Regardless, he had to head above the grey fog to divine the level of danger. Considering how Bilt and Suthoth were sequence 7, or even sequence 6 beyond theirs, Klein didn't directly request to head to the washroom in front of them to prevent them from sensing a problem. As the important figure's identity hadn't been revealed, Bilt wasn't too worried. He nodded. All right, I hope for a pleasant partnership. William Street, a stout man from Fisak who was nearly 2 meters tall, was searching for clues. Suddenly, he felt his spiritual perception trigger as he looked up. Light which resembled the morning sun's rays surfaced around his body, illuminating the surrounding houses and street lamps as though they were illusions. At the same time, sparks soared on the street as all kinds of supernatural phenomena appeared. Indeed, the Soren family has sent people over the man from Fisak who had his suspicions cast his gaze straight down the street. He saw Nighthawks wearing red or black gloves as black gun barrels covered with complicated patterns extended out of the roof tops. They were aimed at him while the surrounding passers-by didn't seem to notice anything amiss. He also saw the Church of Steam and Machinery's Archbishop of the Backland Diocese, Haramic, and the Church of the Evernight Goddess's Archbishop of the Backland Diocese, St. Anthony. Immediately following that, he caught sight of members of the Soren family raising their hands above their heads through the corner of his eye. The powerful Fisak spies also did the same thing. They had decisively chosen to surrender. Resistance only spelled certain death. There was still a chance of being repatriated by surrendering. At 6:30 that evening, Klein once again came to the Sweet Lemon Bar where he met Bilt in Sweet Lemon Bar. He expressionlessly said, an advance of £500. Then, you will need to tell me who I'm supposed to change into. Bilt couldn't hold back his smile as he gestured for Suthoth to collect the funds from the safe while saying with a deep voice, he's the kingdom's highest-ranking Navy commander of the Central Sonya Sea. His Excellency Admiral Mirius Reavolt. A real demigod.